Testing, testing. You can hear me twice. Sorry for the AV pause. So I'm going to talk to you for about 15 minutes about ASPM, Application Security Posture Management, where the heck it came from, what actually is it, why do we need it, some of the different approaches, and some considerations with those different approaches. First, a little bit about me. I've been in and around AppSec since 2015. I worked at BugCrowd, one of their first marketers, awesome community of hackers and security leaders. Spent some time doing more hardcore DevOps and software testing. Percy was one of the very first GitHub app marketplace apps and one of their first actions. So not security, but obviously very, very tangential to what we're talking about. Spent a lot of time at Bridge Crew, which is basically SaaS for IAC and the creators of Chekhov, a wildly popular open source tool. We were acquired by Palo Alto, and I've been with Apiiro for the last year, kind of bringing together everything from AppSec and DevOps and agile development best practices, software supply chain security, and back to AppSec. So before I get started, has anyone, once more, who has heard of ASPM? And of you guys, who has been to a conference in the last 6 months? And did you feel like this? Because we have, especially OWASP DC, OWASP Global in DC. It was like, where the hell did all of these ASPM vendors come from? We, Apiiro obviously aligns to that category, but truly it was like ASPM overload. So that's why we're giving this talk. And in kind of thinking through, this is a new talk for me. It's a much more biased, hopefully facts and facts, not so much about Apiiro. And when I sat down to really think about okay, well, where actually did ASPM come from? I looked back since 2000 and just thought through some of the big milestones and big things that have changed first in the world of software development. So from the Agile Manifesto to now AI everything, looking at just when these things are happening, Jenkins, the CI/CD is becoming a thing, GitHub, Git and GitOps becoming a thing, the first State of DevOps report, Dora becoming a thing, observability becoming a thing, Kubernetes launched, the CNCF being born, and then also kind of at the same time seeing how application security and that market has evolved concurrently. So from OWASP being founded to the first OWASP top 10 and DevSecOps and these different breaches and attacks, Heartbleed, SolarWinds, and then of course, lots of acronyms. And my main takeaway, because I've only really been doing this for the half of this timeline, main takeaway, time is very weird. Some things moved very, very fast and some things moved very, very slowly, but you can see kind of some general trends. Obviously, Agile and AppSec really taking off around at the beginning of 2000. Cloud native technologies really changing how applications are built, delivered, deployed. Also, this shift left banana party time, really kind of trying to bridge this gap between developers and developers being empowered to own security and application security owning security, which we'll talk about some of the challenges with that. Software supply chain security scramble, obviously in the last 3 years has really become all the rage. And then kind of in the last couple years, has anyone heard of CNAP? Sorry also for all the acronyms, I'm putting a lot into one slide. Cloud Native Application Protection Platform, yeah, a couple. This is the mega consolidation of everything under the sun. Is it realistic? I don't know, but there's definitely a movement, and I think ASPM is part of that, to consolidate and regulate, and also AI on top of that. So this is kind of this confluence of events that are happening, and we're here in last year, 2023. Gartner, our friend and enemy, puts out this research paper, an innovation insight. If you don't know what that is, count yourself so lucky. But it's really like the baby of a category, a new category. As soon as a new category is born, they get an innovation insight, and this happens. Everyone is aligning to that category, but I'm just going to go back. So this is kind of like the first sentence in this report. If you want to get just like the like Gartner report, it's at this bit.ly, or talk to me later. It's analyzing security signals across software development, deployment, and operation to improve visibility, better manage vulnerabilities, and enforce controls. So yada, yada, improve application security efficacy and better manage risk. Pretty high level. That's kind of like them saying, this is what this is. What does that mean? Nobody knows. Also, we got to cut them a little bit of slack. This is like their first try at this. Next, they'll do their more robust report. So we'll see what that comes up with. But call me naive. I do believe if there are all of these solutions out there, there's got to be some real problems. So what are those problems that ASPM is solving? One, which Jason kind of touched on, lots and lots of security tools. I read some crazy stat. There's like 4,800 security tools on the market. So they're all kind of speaking their own language, creating their own signals. Two, there's still manual processes. Like, it's not all about tools. We're still manually assessing risk. Every time there's maybe a new major product version, somebody is still looking at those updates, those changes, and assessing the risk. So pen tests, all of these things do not align directly to software development life cycles. They're manual, they're ad hoc. Still silos between developers and security teams. There's no way Shift Left has solved that. It really, in my opinion, and at Bridge Crew, we were big Shift Left Kool-Aid drinkers. It, in many instances, just shifts that problem left. And then the market sucks. It's 2024. We're having to deal with more regulatory requirements. PCI 4 is wild for AppSec teams, and budgets are not getting bigger. AppSec teams are not getting bigger. So all of these things lead to both challenges for development teams, development organizations, and obviously risk. So to solve that problem, we have lots of different like corners of in and around application security trying to become ASPMs. We had this kind of outdated category, application security orchestration and correlation. They're like the glue. They just bring everything together very simply. They're like first on the bandwagon, we're ASPMs. Then more niche kind of group of vendors that really focused on analyzing code, giving you an inventory of all of your application components. They're like, yeah, I think we could also be ASPM. Then application security testing tools, Sneak being one of the main ones that had a very early acquisition. They're like, well, we have all these signals. Why don't we like add the management layer on top of it? Makes sense. Next, we have all the supply chain security companies that are looking at like CI/CD pipelines, source control managers. They're kind of like next gen. They're cool. They're like, oh, we kind of like culturally align to this new category. So then they're like, we're ASPM. Vulnerability management too, a little bit more broad, but they have kind of the same DNA. We're ASPM. We're just going to focus on ASPM, the application segment. And last, which hasn't really started to happen so much, but will very, very soon, is all the cloud and runtime security vendors saying, yes, we aren't just looking at the infrastructure, we're also looking at runtime application security. We are also ASPM. So this is a wild situation. And I think before I go to my amazing word art, if you look, I personally think the naming of ASPM is a little unfortunate. If you look at cloud security posture management, which kind of evolved a little bit out of Greenfield and really was solving the detection and management portion of things, ASPM is not. Like, detection is more or less solved. There's decades of security tooling, And it's this sort of additional layer of abstraction. So there's a little bit of like, I think, misconception in the market, which hopefully we can address here. I looked at all the definitions of ASPM from every single vendor that had something to say, and it really says nothing. Holistic, comprehensive, correlate. Prioritization is a good one, remediation, sure, consolidates, but this really, I think, just furthers the point why I'm having this conversation and why there's so much sort of mystique, and I think people are a little bit already fatigued with this category. So the next portion of this, I'm going to very quickly go through kind of what I have seen in the past year. I've written a shit ton and talked a lot about this category, so I have opinions, and this is the kind of least biased version of, I think, what the main pillars of ASPM are, regardless of what like approach you're taking or where you're coming from. Everyone has to basically cover these three pillars, and it's not that hard, to be considered an ASPM. One, aggregate, putting the things in the basket. You're ingesting signals from third-party tools, you're normalizing those findings, you're correlating them and thus deduplicating them. Two, you're assessing, so you're looking at those individual findings and analyzing them based on different things, which we'll talk about next. Based on those factors that you're using to contextualize, you're also prioritizing. This is, to me, the pinnacle of what ASPM is doing. You're just helping teams focus on what matters, so prioritizing. Also measuring and reporting, lots of dashboards, lots of line charts, and some pie charts as well. And then act. So this is helping teams remediate faster, usually through automation, enforcing security controls and best practices, and managing vulnerabilities and risks in general. So I don't know how much time I have. I forgot to start my timer, but I'm gonna go really quick. So the components of the aggregation, starting from kind of like very high level to more mature. So basic ASOC, or application security orchestration and correlation tool, ingest findings. That's kind of table stakes. But every single type of finding a secret looks very different from an open source vulnerability. And then within those categories, each vendor has different data models and different languages they're speaking. So being able to normalize those in a common language, easier said than done. Then grouping like findings, especially for like secrets. You might have one exposed secret in 15 different places. You need to be able to group those. That's a core value of not only like a secret security tool, but also ASPM. And this kind of can go more and more deep, especially when you're looking from code to runtime. So being able to actually match findings from maybe your DAST to your SaaS tool, or from your CSPM to your SCA, being able to really match those findings across the lifecycle, and tying everything to source code. Application security posture management is deeply rooted in code. I don't care what anyone says, you have to have code, at least a rudimentary understanding of how applications are built and that abstraction layer before you can call yourself an ASPM. This is hard. We already talked about this. There's tons of security tools out there. They all have different types of metadata and models. So covering that breadth is always going to be a challenge. This is kind of just what happens with platforms that are ingesting different things. And it's not just tools. It's also being able to really smartly ingest findings from a pen test or a bug bounty program. And also, this last point is the ASPM market has really focused on large enterprise because they have the tooling. But mid-market, maybe smaller organizations might not have that tooling, and the power of the ASPM is only as strong as the coverage that you already have. So some ASPMs actually start to fill in those gaps. They're doing some of their own secrets detection, some of their own open source security. So that's a consideration. If you don't have full coverage, that's something you should keep in mind. Assessing, you need evidence, you need insights, you need to be able to filter, you need to analyze different types of findings, and again, prioritize based on your environmental and your business factors. This is only valuable if you have deep understanding of your underlying code architecture and runtime context. Like if you don't know if something is deployed or internet exposed, you're not going to be able to totally factor in that risk factor. And then benchmark and report on key KPIs. And I think this is where most ASPMs kind of differ from one another. There's sort of this camp that's a little bit more focused on the ingestion and giving that single pane of glass. And then there's others that are really focused on giving that really high fidelity context to be able to prioritize based on risk. The market will move towards the latter, but you can't do the latter without doing the former really, really well. So it's kind of a vicious cycle right now. And also, ASPMs are providing not just value to AppSec teams, but also to engineering leaders who need to both maintain their development velocities while eliminating like repeat vulnerabilities or high risk vulnerabilities or fixing things within a set SLA. So in order to do that, you again need insight into development activity, contributor behavior, which thus you need access to a source control repository and understanding of code. You get my point. And then lastly, ACT. I think this is where, excuse me, the playing field is most level. I don't think there's like a ton of differences between vendors out there. Most have automation engines to trigger alerts and notifications. Most integrate with your Jira, GitHub, whatever. The third point maybe is you don't have a deep understanding of code. It's harder to tie a finding to the source code and the development owner or team. Those are the people that can fix the fastest. So really, really, really important piece of context. And Jason said it really well. This is still in line with that shift left mentality. You have to be proactive. Nobody's going to get to backlog zero. It has to be built into the development lifecycle, and by surfacing things earlier to developers in their tools and enforcing those policies early. I think I mostly, last point I will make here, there is some use cases around compliance that I think are going to get way more prominent in this space right now. It's very complex mapping different compliance frameworks to different policies, but if compliance is a driving factor for you, that is something you should consider when buying an ASPM. And then again, if there's a solution, there better be some benefits. Some of these are very expensive. At the end of the day, it's improving AppSec efficacy and efficiency. That's what Gartner said. That's what we said. At the end of the day, most security vendors are saying the same thing. And there's always a spectrum of sort of like altruistic securing people's digital lives to making developers' lives suck less. It's sort of somewhere in there, making AppSec teams more efficient, doing more with less. How much am I done? I'm back here. Okay, you were creeping in. Okay, last. You can't go forever, but you can do whatever you want. So whether you're like talking to some sales bro at a booth at the next OWASP event, or you're actually looking to buy an ASPM, here's just some consideration. So one, obviously they need to integrate with your tools. I'm going to keep harping on the value of having strong code level visibility. Again, your prioritization is only as strong as the context you have. That context needs to have from code, and you need to have that matching or that modeling from code to runtime. And prioritization is not just based on your environment. You need to be able to get sort of external factors like EPSS and CSAKEV. All of these things are more or less kind of table stakes, but just make sure that that box is ticked. Automation policy engine needs to be very, very flexible. Everybody's definition of risk is different. Different business units will have different definitions of risk, and you need to be able to very, very clearly and easily define those. At the end of the day, developers have the greatest impact, so it needs to be a great centralized UX for developers. Again, I already kind of covered compliance. The measurement and reporting is, I think, for some people, like the tip of the spear for ASPM. That they think that that's all ASPM does. They just give you nice dashboards and reports, so you can go up to the board or your CEO and say, this is our risk score, or whatever. That's certainly a component, especially with more kind of regulatory and top-down pressures. I don't know if you guys have seen the CISA secure software attestation form. Like, executives now really need to personally attest that their software is secure. If you haven't heard of it, look it up.
Very new, right?
Very new, yeah. Yeah, it's open for comment right now. It came out like in November. They did add a little below the line thing that you can either sign it or have a third-party company sign it for you. Classic government. And then lastly, if you don't have a full suite of security solutions, maybe you could bolster it with that vendors. Maybe you don't have a CI/CD security solution. So if they cover that and tick that box for you, all the better. That's it. Thank you very much.